Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Diverse Stars podcast, third season. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for helping me on my quest to 1,000 subscribers. This is an amazing episode because Mido Hamada boards the mothership. We discuss Alexander, the Making of a God from Netflix. Now come on board with Traversing the Stars. Hi, Mr. Hamada. Thanks so much for coming to the Diverse Stars podcast.
My pleasure for having me. Thank you for having me.
Totally my pleasure. Like I said, I told you just off there, my wife is a big fan of Alexander and a big fan of yours specifically. So thank you. And maybe not thank you because my wife liked you too much. Thank you anyway.
Well, I appreciate your wife and thank you for inviting me on your show. So I guess I got to thank her. So thank you for that.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for acting and who your earliest influences?
Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis inspired my love for acting. I don't know if the younger listeners will remember him. He was an incredible physical comedian. And as a young child, I used to watch all of Jerry Lewis's movies, and because he just made me laugh so
Hmm.
much. He was a big inspiration as a kid to get into acting because I really wanted to go actually into comedy much more than into drama. Funny how life works. I'm more known now for the really intense dramatical stuff and than the comedy. But he is what really got me started and what got me interested in becoming an actor as a kid.
That's awesome. So you have a long career future as a comedian?
I tell you what, I had there was a time in my life where I thought I'd be a stand-up comedian, and then I figured, and then when I got into it and I learned how much they actually have to write, they have to write all their whole jokes, and it's not just off the cuff, and it's not just improv, and there's so much that goes into the craft of stand-up that I said, I'll just be a watcher. I'll just, I'll take it in this way than actually, participate in it. I have such huge admiration for it. I wouldn't want to fuck it up for anybody.
So as someone who's been known for drama but loves comedy, is comedy harder than drama or is drama harder than comedy?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the person, and I think it depends on what comes naturally to you, which emotions come more naturally to you.
Mhm.
I think they're both easy and they're both difficult in equal measures. And I think it's just a question of preference and also just where your talents lie. I think, some people just have comic timing. That's just the way it is. And some people just don't. And that doesn't mean they can't do other things, So I think it just goes in what you enjoy doing.
Can you teach comedic timing?
Can you teach comedic times? I'm sure that you can learn it a little bit, you know. But it's a feel thing. It's like when you start interacting, like when I used to do plays, and it's very funny when you're on stage and you have to tell a joke on stage. It's very similar to being a stand-up. So you have a live audience there every single day, but you tell the joke at the same time, but the audience completely responds completely different to it, even though it's the same joke.
Right.
So you have to adapt to it. And so you can only learn that through experience. So yes, it is what it is. It's beautiful.
Now, what could be the most important question of the entire interview,
Okay.
based on what we're going to talk about, is it Darius or Darius, depending on what I watch on the series? How are you saying it?
I would always say Darius.
Darius. All right.
That's how I say it. I saw that some of the experts they weren't clear on the pronunciation, but I always said it Darius, and that's how we kind of talked to it on set.
Me and my wife were debating it, how I should refer to it to you. I was like, no, I'm going to say Darius. She's like, well, I don't know. It could be Darius. I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to ask him or just say it different ways throughout the interview and just assume that people know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Darius works for me.
All right. So you actually play King Darius in the very popular Alexander TV show on Netflix, which is so far for everyone I talked to is well beloved. So good job on that.
Thank you.
So how did
Very
you get
happy.
involved? Oh, no problem. So how did you get involved on the project?
Oh wow. S- I was filming another project. I was in Budapest, and I was shooting a show for HBO at the time called Spy Masters, and I got the offer for this because I had worked with the showrunner's wife on a drama documentary 20 years ago, one of my first acting jobs. And I remembered I had worked with her 20 years ago. So they reached out to me and saw that I had an availability after I was finishing that, which lined up perfectly with what they were looking for. And so it just worked out really well. Everything came together and I was able to go to Morocco straight away and shoot this beautiful thing.
So you have a boring life. Budapest, Morocco, whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm based in the UK, right? So when we're shooting from the UK, it's really all over the place in Europe, So there's a
Yeah.
lot of productions in Budapest. There's a lot of productions in Morocco and stuff. It's a little bit different because I lived in LA for over 10 years, and when I was shooting from there, it was a lot of stuff that we'd shoot in LA, maybe some stuff in New York, and then you've got a lot of stuff in Canada and stuff. But here it's immediately a different country. You go and it's a different country, a different language, and it's slightly different.
Hell of a life, I must say.
I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining.
So get the role of King Darius, like I said, one of the great emperors of Persia. Um, how aware were you of who Darius was, of the time period? How much research had to go into figuring it all out?
Yeah, so I knew a little bit about the Persian Empire, and I'd heard about obviously Cyrus the Great and Darius the Great, which is a different Darius than the Darius that I played. They were very much known to me, not a known commodity as such, but I knew about their history. Darius the third, this one, I did not know. I knew very little about him. So I did have to look into and find out a little bit about who he was and what his story was. But to be honest with you, so much of it was in the scripts,
Hmm.
because everything that you see the historians talk about was also in the script. So I got a good mixture of, the character and the backstory at the same time as, the script of actually playing the scenes that we're playing.
So one cool thing about the series, and one of the reasons me and my wife's a big fan of it, I have a anthropology background as well, so it's kind of my thing. Is there's actually the researchers talking about are actually in an active dig in Alexandria, discovering some aspects of Alexander's life in that area. Did you have the opportunity to go visit those sites during, before, or after filming?
No,
Oh,
unfortunately not. No. So we were in Morocco. We were in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. And we're shooting in a location called Ouarzazate. And then further on, we went to a location in Marrakesh. So that's actually where everything took place and where we shot everything. I didn't get a chance to go to Egypt, to go to Alexandria to see those sites, even though I am Egyptian and I've been to Alexandria many times. But I actually, when I was there as a young kid, I had zero interest in that. And so I knew very little about it. But now it would probably be very different. When I go, I would seriously look it up for sure.
mm. So obviously, interesting about King Darius III. We'll have to clarify, as you mentioned, there's a King Darius that the first, and there we're talking about the third one.
Mhm.
Um, he was not born in royalty. He kind of earned, I don't know, the right word is maneuvered his way into
He
royalty.
married the right person. That's
Right.
just what it is. He married the right person, and he married into the royal family and through his wife, and gained access to the throne that way, as well as then establishing himself as a really a good leader. There was even a time where he was in battle where he challenged the opposing general to single combat, to keep the other soldiers from dying, and so to have the result of the battle be done that way, so through single combat. So he was quite a interesting person, all in all. And I think what we try to portray in the show is where he started and where he ended up and how he fell, and that was really the interesting part of him.
See, the interesting what you just mentioned is that about him fighting single combat. And by the way, if things could be done like that now, that'd probably be a much better world. If we could just have the two leaders fight it out and be like,
Right?
all right, you won, game
Right?
over.
I think that's a great solution. I think there'll be no more wars because none of them are doing anything. So
Right.
yeah, it's a great solution. Let's do that.
Well, I think it's also fascinating, like you mentioned, that he did do these fights because in the series itself, right, they do show you or Darius practicing to fight. Every time there's a conflict, they show him running away from the fight or not participating.
A
So it is a
huge bone of
different,
contention. A
right,
huge bone of contention. I fought with the producers. I fought with the director. I wanted to have fight sequences, and they wouldn't let me have it
really
Be-
why?
because the historians insisted that he fled the battlefield and that he would have been protected by everybody and that he, as a Persian king, wouldn't actually engage in that kind of combat right there. And then they wanted to also to have that in stark contrast, obviously, to what Alexander is doing.
Mm.
Who's in the middle of it, he's leading the line and all that kind of stuff. That's not how the Persians did it. I was very much of the mindset of saying to him, hey, listen, he's got to fight. He can't just do this. This is his wife, his daughter. Come on, you gotta. And so in the end, they compromised and gave me a little bit of dummy training
Right, right, right.
and training
Uh,
with one of the and that was the compromise we made because they wouldn't allow me to do any fight sequences on the actual battle sequence. But I tried really hard. Let me just say that.
I must say, because it paints a very different picture of Darius. For one, like they said, they call it statecraft, but we call it wussing out. And and the fighting of the dummies was once again, it was cool that he was practicing, but it's like, well, you're not actually, if you're unless you're actually gonna go in the battlefield and actually do anything, you're just trying to, show how tough you are.
Well, it was more about his impotence. At that moment, when that scene occurs, Statira and Barzine had already been taken,
Yeah.
so they were already gone. So it was really about showing his inability, his rage, this inner thing. It's like everything that's happened to him, and no. At the end of the day, they wouldn't let me shoot it. That's it. They just said no. I tried, and that's the best we got.
So, in your opinion, then, was it statecraft or was it cowardice watching him come off the field the way he was?
I don't think at that stage, cowardice is really hard to prove. These
Mm,
people have different lives than we do today. They're much harder and tougher and not as soft as we are today.
right.
So to throw that aspect and say he was a carrot, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that was his generals going, if you die, the kingdom dies.
Mm,
So my job is to protect you, and you got to get out of here because the tide has turned. And when you watch other movies, you see that a lot, that the king is actually not in the fray. He's behind the line, and the lines attack in front of him, and everything happens. That was the main distinction of what made Alexander so different.
mm,
The reason Darius lost is not because he was a bad person or he was inept. It's because he didn't have the flexibility of mind that Alexander had.
mm.
And Alexander came into it with a young, agile mind and going, I see what you're doing. I've read about this with Aristotle. I know all the answers to this. Let me do something different. And Darius sitting there going, oh, yeah, we've done this a million times. This is how it's done, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is how you do battle. And of course, we know what the consequences are from that.
I think that's kind of interesting is that watching the series, especially at the end, they refer to Alexander as being the hero of antiquity, blah, blah, blah. However, he started the fight. Darius was kind of living his life as the emperor of Persia, and for all his indications, he wasn't a bad emperor for any knowledge that I have
No,
about
no,
him.
no.
So, is it fair to be calling Alexander the hero, or is it Victor told the story in this case?
Ah, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because if you know a little bit about Alexander's story, the reason Alexander got into the beginning of the story is because he had daddy issues. I mean, that's the whole journey is he had daddy issues, right? Philip of Macedon and that thing of trying to grow beyond the shadow of your father
Mm,
and what it is that you need to do that. And then finding really just settling on the Persians as being, okay, that's what we got to sort out now. This
mm,
is the slight that was done to us several years ago. This is what you do to get it back. And I think what happens then is that it just catches fire. It just becomes this kind of snowball that starts to roll and it starts to roll, and Alexander just keeps on going. Now, is he a hero? I think I don't know. I mean, if you say that the winner is the hero, then I guess you'd say he is the hero because he
mm,
won the battle and he's the one that we're talking about now. Nobody's talking about Darius. He's the one that everybody knows is Alexander the Great. So I guess he's heroic in that. But I always kind of side more to Darius's side because
mm.
he he wasn't a warmonger at that stage. He was just living in his palace and he was enjoying his life and he was kind of not taking anybody seriously because he could rest on the laurels of all the previous lions and kings that were before him.
Mm. And another thing that you mentioned that's kind of interesting is the idea of the importance of blood. Alexander, once again, the prince of issue with his father, with the king, becomes supposedly the son of Zeus, becomes named as a god on earth as a pharaoh in Egypt. There's a lot going on about the importance of his bloodline. Going back to Darius, not royal blood, gets married into royal blood. How does that differentiate the two? How does it affect Darius psychologically that he doesn't have that while Alexander is walking around saying, now, living God on earth, demigod of Zeus, prince of a king of Macedon.
Yeah, that's I don't think that Darius was bothered by his legitimacy to the throne that much, because I think in his mind he'd proven his worth, so it wasn't just that I got this because I married into the right family. I don't think that he felt that Alexander had one over on him when it comes to that. What he did have, and I think that's what we tried to explore and examine in the show, is it's very rare in life that you lose something to one person. It's very rare in life that you lose everything to one singular person. So when does it happen that you lose your entire kingdom to one man? A substantial kingdom at the time, the biggest one that existed, you lose the entirety of that kingdom to one man. You lose your wife to the same man. You lose your daughter to the same man. Your wife dies during childbirth from that man to the same man. So I think that's a lot to take. And that's a lot. I think that's a lot for somebody not to break. And I think that's that realization that he has when he's, right before Bessus kills him, where he's like, look at this great dream that we've established. And all we really needed was a custodian, and I couldn't do the fucking job. I couldn't take care of this fucking kingdom. I lost everything. It's all gone. My wife is gone, my kingdom is gone, my daughter is gone, everything's gone. And that's the realization. And then he dies and then he kills, and I think that's a tough thing because I don't know if you know anybody, I don't know anybody in life who's lost who can pinpoint everything to one person.
Mm,
This is why everything's wrong in my life is because of that one person
mm.
that I haven't even met, by the way.
So,
I've never even met.
so then there's a bit of a grudge there.
Yeah, tiny. Tiny. I think that's what you see in that sequence where he's hitting the dummy. That's what you see. He was like, I guess then I'm going to kill a god. I'm going to be known as a god killer. To him, it's all about getting because he didn't take him seriously in the beginning. I'm
Mm.
like, who is this young upstart in Macedon? He's like, what? He doesn't even know who he is. He doesn't take him seriously whatsoever. And then as the events unfold, you know, he does.
And I think that's fantastic, especially how you played it, because he does show at the beginning he's very prideful, dismissive of Alexander, cocksure, and all that. But if he has a tragic flaw, is his tragic flaw pride? At that point, that he is that confident, and that if he stopped him earlier on and had everything early on, do you think he would have had the victory?
I don't know. Maybe Alexander was special, you know? Alexander was special, and I don't know if Darius had the same special. Do you know? And I think that's even if you take a young Darius and pitch him against the same level of Alexander, I don't know. I think Alexander was very, very unique in his drive. Do you know, first of all, you've got to have that appetite.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're already the son of a king. Like now you have the appetite, you want to conquer and conquer and conquer and conquer and conquer. That's just not normal to keep wanting to go. It's
Right.
he's different. That like Darius did the right thing. He just like I got everything. Let me chill out and rest on my laurels and let me enjoy this luxury that we've built up around us. Alexander wants none of that. As soon as he gets comfortable, he moves.
Hmm. And I think another was there a moment in the series for you that as you're reading the script you understood this is Darius. That gives you the absolute insight to who he was.
The insight came when he received the news of the passing of his wife.
Hmm.
I think that was an insight where you kind of where I think I as an actor realized he lost all his power.
Hmm.
All his juice is gone. And that was a realization of that. And as Bessus is trying to prop him up and trying to go meet the people and you got to be strong now and lift him up. That's why everybody after that moment really they start to second guess his decisions and everything. It's because to me that was the moment when he lost her, he died. Because she wasn't just the throne for him. I mean, his access to the throne. I mean, that was a great love story for them. And so, to have that end the way it did, that crushed him.
There's a moment when I think it's Bessus who tells him about his wife and Alexander and that they seem to be a thing. And Darius responds different than you would expect. He's not angry. He's more almost like contemplative, like that makes sense. That's probably the only thing she could do.
Exactly.
So, how do you think? I mean, how did you understand that moment for him?
Yeah, brilliant pickup there. That was there's so many ways that you could play the receiving of that news,
Mm,
and where he gets to, and I think as we were discovering it and filming it, what became clear is that he is always on her side.
mm,
He's always on her side. And so no matter what somebody tells him and what he hears, he will see it from her perspective because that's how linked they are. And that's how he feels. And that's when he has in that same moment, he goes, that and I will kill him. With my bare hands, I'll rip
mm.
him apart. And that's that realization of, oh my God, this is what they did to her. She's got no other choice. She has to do this to survive. Otherwise, and I think, yeah, it's he's always seeing everything from her perspective.
Now, having known the series, do you think in reality the wife was falling for Alexander, or do you think she was playing, as I think was mentioned by one of the experts, the only card she had left, which was might as well, you got to get it with Alexander if you're going to survive.
Yeah, I think she was a survivor. And I think women and in those times, were because it's definitely a man's world in that
Mm,
stage, in that area of warfare and what's going on. And so she's helpless. So what cards does she have to play? She's got nothing else to play but try to survive. And you got to remember, she's not just thinking of herself, she's thinking of her daughter.
mm,
Barzine is there as well. So she's trying to be a buffer as well, because they could be raping both of them endlessly if they wanted to, that they didn't
mm.
do any of that. So that's another thing. They treated them really with respect and they treated them like royalty. So that's another thing that Alexander really did.
Now, another couple of moments in it happens a few times in the series, which kind of gives you a sense of Darius' state of mind, where he tries to bribe Alexander into ending the war. He tries to first, give me back my wife, and I'll give you half the empire, things of that nature. He gives away, I think it's Mazaeus's,
Yeah.
the
Barzine.
yeah, it would have been his wife. He tried to sell her off to, which cost him as well later on. Is this desperate? Is this intelligent statecraftman? Is this just I want my wife back and whatever I can do to make this happen? How did you view those moments?
I guess it's going back to what we were saying before, the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things.
Hmm.
And I think that Darius and the Persian Empire were very used to being able to do that because of their position on the global map and how much riches they had in their favor. And I think until that time, he would have been able to solve all these little problems through those means. It would
Hmm.
have been, and it's not, it shows again that he goes back to what he knows. Let me try this. He even says it to Mazaeus. He's Macedonian. Of course they'll take a bribe. It's like this is what they do.
Hmm.
So he's confident that that it will work, but he just doesn't know who Alexander is. He doesn't understand his ambition or his drive or, his motivation.
Now, assuming, let's say it's just hypothetical. Alexander, let's say, took the deal, the empire split in half. Would you think either one of them would have been happy in the long term, or you think eventually they would have to have gone for the other half, regardless of how that deal worked out?
I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. We wouldn't know about either one of them.
Hmm. Good point. Good point.
I think that's it, the point. We wouldn't know about either one of them because nothing would be special. The reason we know about it is because Alexander was special. He kept doing and kept going. So then we know about his opponents. If he would have taken the bribe and taken half the kingdom, the other guy took the half the kingdom, we wouldn't know about them now. It would just be like, a footnote in a history book somewhere, and this is what happened then, and they gave him half his kingdom. We wouldn't know anything about it.
I think one of the brilliant things he did as an actor is showed progression of Darius throughout that time period. From, like I said, we said the cocky um, leader to the desperate, lone in the world kind of leader. You also have one of the best lines, I think, the entire series, which is "We will be the storm," which I think is absolutely such a great line. And you said it with such vigor, such so well done.
It's the delusion that he's in at that moment still, because he says to Bessus, we will be. Well, you got to remember, Bessus to them said in the mind, is like, well, they got to come through the desert. And everybody that's ever tried to come through the desert has failed and they're going to die. And that's his plan. And he's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I don't need the desert. We are the Persian Empire. We are the storm. That's still his hubris in that moment. We are still witnessing his hubris, his belief in who they are, the old empire.
Yeah.
You know,
It was, I think it was a brilliant. Is it hard to build that progression over time like that to slowly watch him unwind or create or act perform the character slowly unwind the way you did with him because it feels like something that can't you didn't want to rush it but it felt like this nice gradual unwinding of the man.
well, I have to be honest, and I can't tell you that anything in that shoot was gradual. We shot 6 episodes in 6 weeks. So it was an insane shoot. So nothing felt gradual. It we felt like we were dealing with sandstorms, we were dealing with all sorts of things and time and I think the the gradualness of where he started and where that king, I think we just built that scene to scene,
Mm,
just kind of realizing I had done a lot of um mental preparation in terms of thinking about who he is and what's going through. And I think then you actually do the filming of it. You don't do any thinking. At that stage, you're just reacting.
mm,
And things are just happening and you allow them to happen and whatever comes out, comes out. You go with it. But definitely during the prep, when I was thinking about that, everything to me was about that moment when he finds out that she's dead.
mm,
And that to me was really the crux of the character because it's that thing of hubris, hubris, hubris. He's still even sword fighting before he gets the news. I can do all this, and then it's just And then you have to be as open and as honest and as forthright and courageous in showing the man at his high point and showing the man as he's descending to his low point. And you have to give them both equal energy so that, you really see from where he went to where he came, and that's the beauty of an exploration of a character like that, of a role like that, of a person like that who had such a life. So he's a gift. It was, I tell you what, he was a gift to play. And I'm very grateful that I had a chance to play him because I learned a lot from him.
Hmm.
I learned a lot from him. Like his response that he had when, the moment that you talked about when Mazaeus tells him that, she doesn't look like a prisoner, she's not acting like a prisoner. I never knew that we were going to play it like that. I never envisioned that it would come out like that, but that's what happened, and we stuck with it, and it, hopefully it worked. And it's things like that where sometimes you don't get to know the people until you start speaking their words.
Hmm. There's also, as you mentioned, the moment where he's looking over, his empire, and right before Bessus is going to kill him. Now, in your mind as the character, did he know at that moment that Bessus was about to kill him and he was kind of speaking his final words, or do you think he just was speaking and Bessus took advantage of him not paying attention?
Well, that's for the audience to decide.
Okay.
That was the ambiguity that we wanted to give that moment. There's an ambiguity to that moment of whether, because his line is like, it doesn't have to be treachery.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So what does that mean when he knows a guy standing there? Does he know? Does he not know? Does he saying it for sure? That was to me, I wanted to play it a little bit more ambiguous. I think the conversation between the director Hugh and myself in that moment where was about that. He was kind of veering like that he doesn't know he's going to get killed, and I was veering. No, I think he does know. He knows something's going, but the truth is he probably didn't,
Hmm.
and he probably did not. But I think the beauty of the moment was the ambiguity,
Hmm.
you know. So the audience can decide.
Well, like I said, I think the series was fantastic. I think you were fantastic in the series as Darius. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
What's next for you?
Right now, I'm shooting a show here in the UK called Testament. It's a take on the Old Testament and putting it into the modern time. So yeah, it's really interesting actually because I don't know how you are, but I don't really know much about what happens after Jesus dies. Like to me, it's like I know everything up to then, and after that, it just becomes a little bit like, I don't really know that much. So it's nice for me to actually learn through the scripts, you know, and the fact that they put it into a modern setting is really an interesting take.
So is that going to be available worldwide? Is this going to be only able to be watched in Great Britain?
I think it'll be available worldwide, but it'll be on a streamer, but I don't know which streamer that is yet. I
Hmm.
think that then, that gets sold afterwards and stuff like that. So where it's going to go, I don't know yet.
Well, when
But
it's time. Okay, when
sorry.
it's time to talk about it, you're going to come back on?
Absolutely, I'll come back on. I'll come back on anytime, and my pleasure.
I want to thank you just so much for coming on. Thank you for giving me some great conversation with me and my wife after the show was over. So thank you so much.
Well, please send your wife my love, and hopefully I'll see you both soon.
Fantastic. Thank you. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Traverse Stars podcast. Please help me battle the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to return for the next episode when Tom DeFalco boards the mothership. We discuss Maximum Carnage and the Amazing Spider-Man. Until next voyage, travel on.